Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games or later on your favorite podcast service, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health in these unprecedented times as well as how gaming affects us. If you hear this live in the chat, you can leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. And our topic today is, well, thank you for being a better friend. But before we get to that, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know?
All right. I always start. We've established.
It's only been 19 shows.
Tradition!
Yeah, I know. I keep wanting to change tradition, but hey. All right. So I am Mitra Jordan. I am a clinical counselor, psychotherapist working in Victoria, British Columbia. I love games, I play games, and I often end up talking about games, game use, video games with clients, particularly with regards to kids and families, but also their own use of games and socializing. So,
yeah. And who else is that there?
Well, I'm Dr. B. Hi. No, I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. People see the double consonants and they're like, no. I am a doctor of clinical psychology. I'm non-practicing, but I was spent a lot of time training in various settings. And I do nothing but policy and education work these days as the clinical director of what was at the time the very first mental health nonprofit to serve in the game community, TakeThis.org. Our whole mission is to educate people on mental health stuffs and to destigmatize that, because there's still a lot of stigma and shame around the idea of mental health challenges. And in addition to that, I'm very frank, openly talking about some of my own, especially being autistic. And I'm also an expert on the applied use of tabletop role-playing games in clinical and learning settings. And I am so excited to be talking about this today.
yeah.
This is a good one. This is one of them that, like, I mean, I've liked all of the topics that we've done, but like when this one got brought up as a topic idea, I'm like, I absolutely love this, because I think this is not only going to be a fun thing to talk about, but a fun thing for listeners and viewers to hear about as well. So what do we mean by thank you for being a better friend? Like, what's our goal here?
Well, I think our goal is to revive the Golden Girls, where we. No,
Chat, discuss who each of us are.
I'm Rose. Just straight up, I'm Rose. I mean, like, no joke.
Lord, Golden Girls, the OG D&D party.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna take credit for something, because I did not put my name on it when I created this, and I've seen it make rounds in some D&D memes. If you have seen a picture of the Golden Girls with like Sophia as a rogue, Blanche as the bard, Dorothy as the paladin, and Rose as the confused cleric, I did that. I just didn't put my name on it when I posted it to Instagram.
That'll show you.
It's perfect.
So this is actually a question we've heard a lot at Take This over the nearly 6 years, over the last nearly 6 years that I've been there. And it's a question of how can I be supportive of people who are struggling with their emotions, whether it's due to a diagnosis or not due to a diagnosis. We all have these moments when we're feeling vulnerable and down. And so often when we as people, because we want to stop our friends from suffering, we want to help them. And so we get in there and we try and like fix their problems and we give them all these suggestions. And for some reason they get angry. Why? We're just trying to help.
Uh-huh. So what
Hey,
is
Mitra,
good
you have
help?
thoughts?
I have so many. Good help. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to set good boundaries around helping the help I am able to give, the kind of support you're looking for or need, and just how to have fun with your friends as well, what things interfere with that sometimes. So, yeah, sounds good.
Where do we want to start with this?
Well,
It's we could consult the notes.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, no, we did make an outline.
Yeah.
we did. We our very first thing was, why are we talking about this?
Yeah.
I noticed we wrote that, and someone remind me, why are we talking about this?
Well, we're talking about this because of what I just brought up. The
Yeah.
idea that it's when people want to fix problems for other people, it seems like it's our natural inclination to jump in and just like tinker around and fix things. But it often, when somebody is really vulnerable and struggling, that's many times not what they're looking for. Someone to come in and fix things. They're often looking for things like empathy, validation, just having a holding space. And the reassurances and the solutions that we give them can often be seen as minimizing. Or,
Absolutely.
yeah, or like mindless cheerleading that could be toxic positivity that just denies the problem in its entirety and can be demeaning to people who like, we all, have you tried kale? Have you tried yoga? Have you done this and this and this and this? No, so that's why we're talking about this.
Yeah, we also note that so much of the time, and I've had clients like this, we've had friends like this who worry about being a burden when they're not in the best or most positive space. And that's unfair to them, because if they're feeling like they're a burden, implication, you might try to fix it as well. That somehow they're coming at you as a problem to be fixed, which they aren't. They're a person. They're a human being you have memories, thoughts, feelings, connection, fun with. And really the task of a friend in some ways at those times is just to remind, by your presence and your shared memories and your history, is to remind them in some ways that there's so much more than what they're going through. And you don't need to say that to be that. You know, in fact, for you to sit there and say you're so much more than what you're going through is super insulting anyway. And also, again, is part of that mindless cheerleading. So how to be a better friend also applies to other relationships in your life. It can be at times how to be a better office mate to or work person, colleague. It can certainly be how to be a better partner, because the skills that apply in relationships generally go fairly well across the board, particularly around how well you listen, what sorts of things you say when someone shares something that might be tough for them or painful for them. So,
well, one of the things that I just want to offer to everybody is this idea that, well, there's two things. And this is one of those things is something that a supervisor of mine back in my training days said to his students many, many times. And I worked with this particular supervisor for almost 3 years. And so I got to see multiple classes go through. So I heard all of his stories multiple times. They were great stories. And when one of the things he would remind students of frequently is that if we were in session with somebody and we started feeling helpless and panicky or confused or overwhelmed, to remind ourselves, how must they be feeling if this is such a problem that we are feeling overwhelmed and confused and helpless and we just want to fix things. So that's the first thing I will say. But the other thing is to reframe the idea of doing nothing and just sitting with a problem as actually doing something.
Definitely.
The idea of creating enough safety in a relationship to have a difficult conversation and just kind of hold it there. A metaphor that I've used with people in the past when talking about this is it's like picking up water. When you pick up water, you don't reach in and squeeze. You gently cup and just hold it there. And creating solutions immediately is like trying to pick up water by reaching in and squeezing it. And so the idea of sitting with somebody's problems, sitting with the ambiguity, allowing yourself to feel that helplessness and that confusion and that ambiguity is in and of itself doing something. So let's just reframe that right here and now.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about that, that's a great metaphor, by the way. I really like it. And I also appreciate what you're saying about sometimes when you sit with someone and you're feeling really challenged by what you hear, and it leads to, oh my God, and I've certainly experienced this as a therapist. It leads to, wow, what am I going to offer? The problem with that is, although at some level, when I'm sitting with clients, I'm sifting through, all right, what kinds of, where am I going to go with this? Or what am I seeing in terms of treatment? If I do too much of that, I'm not present with the client. Maybe I'm missing something important. So a big piece of this is to set those anxieties that you're feeling and the control that you want to impose in response to that, and be present for the person's experiencing. What are they sharing? What are they going through? What haven't you heard yet that maybe at some point you want to ask a little bit about or have them elaborate on?
Well, it's you in our pre-production meeting for this, Mitra, you asked a really good question, and it's something that I've never overtly asked myself. I've considered it sort of unconsciously, but I've never overtly asked this question of myself: whose agenda are you enacting? Are you being present to listen to what they actually need? And maybe what they need is solutions. Maybe that's actually what they need, but maybe it's not. Are you being present enough to help them enact their agenda, or are you so distressed, or are you just going through the motions to enact yours? And that's a valuable question.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of question that can really change how you are in someone's presence. It's actually particularly, what's useful with everyone. It's also particularly useful with teens, actually, because I think we often take over with younger people. Okay, I'm gonna fix this. I know what's going on. But we certainly do it in friendship and with partners as well. So someone may not know exactly what they want, but the more they continue speaking, the more you continue listening and asking, the more clear that can become. And that's a way to tap into someone's own agenda and their own expertise, which is like, you may not know exactly what you want from this, but how are you doing? And what's particularly tough now? And what would make tonight easier? So there's the questions around the broader picture that's going on, the maybe immediate needs, and maybe your role in that. And your role may just really be to sit there and take in what you're hearing and ask questions and just help them feel heard. Because the one thing I know about most of my clients is that in some way or another, they haven't been heard at various points. And if they're not being heard, how will they have the space to hear themselves? And that goes for your friends too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think an evocative, and an easy illustration for a lot of us to sort of anchor to, because I think we've all done this at one point, is the idea that maybe you yourself have been struggling with a problem for a long time. Okay. You've been turning it over in your mind for hours, days, weeks, who knows? And you're feeling lost about it. You're feeling overwhelmed about it. You're just basically feeling this is enough. I can't figure this out on my own. And you you're very vulnerable as you admit this struggle to someone you trust, as you've been turning it over in your mind for hours, weeks, days, whatever. And immediately, without asking a question about it, that friend just responds with, have you tried insert solution here?
Mm-hmm.
How deflated do you feel in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
When you internally have been struggling with this for so long, and really what you wanted was to be seen, to be heard, to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the skills that we could look at maybe picking up that could help with this?
Well, one of the ones that there's a couple that I like to think about. Now, originally this is therapist skills essentially, but there are aspects of this stuff that can benefit anybody. And so there's a form of therapy called motivational interviewing. And I'm not saying all of this because I think you all should go out and do therapy with people. You absolutely should not therapize your friends under any circumstances.
Do not.
But there are some aspects to what's called motivational interviewing that are just darn good listening skills and good conversational skills. And they use the acronym OARS. What that stands for is open-ended questions, affirmations of the things that are worthy of affirming, not in sort of a toxic positivity kind of way, reflections of what you're hearing the person say, and summaries of what you've heard so far, allowing them to correct you. So again, that's open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And part of that is sort of this humble attitude of letting them correct you. And I know Mitra has a lot to say on this sort of that sort of humility in listening.
Oh, did you want me to say more?
I was trying to give you a segue, and I
Well, you were just on such a wonderful roll. I was really enjoying it. I was actually wondering
I'm handing
if I should.
No, I'm giving you the conch. It's sucks to my Asmar.
Oh my God.
So the humility piece is that sometimes when a person has shared about an experience, and then you might say, wow, it sounds like X or Y. And they might say, well, no, it's actually not that. It's this other thing. And we might feel somehow in being corrected in this way that we failed or gotten it wrong. But I can tell you, I get it wrong often with clients, certainly when I'm first getting to know them. I might hear what they've said, and then I might say, wow, and is this a piece of your experience? Or do you find that blah, blah, blah happens? Or, I try not to ask closed questions, but sometimes when you're empathizing, you might also find yourself saying, so I'm wondering if there was an element of betrayal there for you. So it's open-ended, but it's also specific to a thing. And they might say, no, it wasn't betrayal at all. Okay. This is an opportunity to get further in there in terms of understanding a person's experience.
Yeah. Letting them correct you.
Yep.
Is in and of itself. I mean, if we think about relationship building as a metaphorical distance between people, and bringing that distance in closer, a lot of people, when they think about empathizing and validating, think that getting that right is the only way to close that distance between two people. And while it's true that correctly labeling someone's experience or correctly reflecting your understanding of someone's experience is a way of closing that gap, getting it wrong and then humbly letting them correct you is another way to close that gap.
Absolutely.
Because empathy and validation, like Mitra just brought up, they're a guess.
Yep. And the more deeply you know a person and maybe their responses to previous experiences, there's a greater likelihood that you'll get it right. But that doesn't matter. You see, because this piece about getting it right, being a good friend, saying the right stuff, that's about you and your relationship to friendship and your agenda in that moment to do the right thing. We want you to learn to set that aside. Your agenda is to be present to the other person and to notice what's happening for them. At those moments when you're working about communication, when you're thinking about how to be there for someone, doesn't really matter if you're not getting it right all of the time, as long as you're just present. So
And incidentally, so one of my former professors and one of my former supervisors as well was a trainer in this form of therapy called motivational interviewing. And again, caveat: don't therapize your friends. What I'm telling you all is one aspect of an incredibly complex system that happens to be just darn good listening skills. Okay. And a tip that he used to give all of his students is the idea of attend to the emotion, label the emotion. And a trick I have for myself is if I only need 3 words to label an emotion: you feel, and then the name of the emotion. I feel like chicken tonight is not an emotion. It's also betraying my age, the fact that I use that reference. But even over labeling somebody's emotion, like using a more intense emotion than they might be feeling and letting them pull you back, that's a way of creating that connection. And Mitra brought up that example of, you're feeling betrayed. I'm not feeling betrayed. Oh, okay. Well, help me understand.
Yeah. Again, it's an important process in terms of listening to help a person in some ways. If you say, I wonder about X, or remember that time when your dad did such and so and it brought up this, is it kind of like that, and having a dialogue about that, that's great, right? The piece around therapizing is this. I'll lay it out for you. So one time in my training, I went to see my supervisor, and I was working a lot in divorce and separation at the time. So I was seeing an awful lot of clients who were really struggling with this and maybe had abusive ex-partners and challenges seeing their children and all kinds of stuff. And I had a friend who was going through something similar. And it was challenging because my parents had separated as well. And a lot of what was happening is she was going through a divorce and separation, and her kids were around the same age that I had been at the time. So there I am chatting to my supervisor and saying, and I feel like I'm seeing it everywhere and it takes me back, and I'm setting myself aside, which, all good therapists should do. And all good friends should do actually too. When a friend is talking about their stuff, you may be tempted to insert your own experience. Try not to. If they bring it up, what was it like for you when X? Great, because then that's their agenda, not yours, right? Anyway. So we're talking about this, and I said, and she asked me about this being the friend. And then I said, well, she could do that and she could try the other, but it's so frustrating because, she's not listening. He leaned forward and he said, do you have a helping relationship with X being the friend? And I said, no. And he said, that's right. X is your friend. You don't have a helping contract with them like you do with your clients. And I'm like, ooh, penny dropping. So you do not have a helping contract with your friends. If you agree to help them move and lift some furniture, in that moment, yes, you have a helping contract to lift furniture, right? But in the broader sense, around their mental health, you don't have a helping contract. What you have is a connection where both of you are significant in the relationship, which is very different than therapy, where I am working for you. And we are not going to get into me, my stuff, my history, whatever, my ability to be present through something, whatever. But if a friend has called on me to talk something through, that is their agenda. And I, as their friend, just need to listen. I don't have a helping contract. I don't have a treatment plan. I don't have solutions. I am there to say at the end of some of this, all right, what do you need tonight? Like, would it help if I brought some food, or like, Do you need, you can make suggestions, but if they're like, no, I'm fine on those fronts, it was just great to talk, perfect. If they say, do you know a good therapist? Perfect. I can suggest one. I can say, maybe, do you want to think about seeing a professional? Like, how are you with that? Like, I can say that, but I can't say, I think you should do X or Y or Z, or worse yet, don't say, wow, that kind of stuff never happens to us. Don't ever say that. That is like the most invalidating thing. Also, don't say.
Unless, hold on. Unless you immediately follow it up. That this sort of thing does not happen to me, so I'm having a hard time understanding it from your perspective, and I'm still going to try.
Okay, fair. Although I really have a very, it's tough when people say, I can't imagine what you're going through. Listen, I know you can't imagine. Okay, listen, I know, I get it. You haven't lost a child, or you haven't gone through a miscarriage, or your husband didn't just lose his arm. Yes, these are experiences I have not had. You, the friend who's going through this stuff, knows full well I haven't had those experiences because we've known each other for some time, and I never mentioned that my husband has no leg, right? So 20 years of friendship, it never came up. Like, who does that?
Well,
no.
I think it's I think there's a pressure that a lot of us feel to 100% understand the ins and outs of someone else's experience.
You're not gonna. Don't even try.
And I think we should probably call that out, that even if there's overlaps in your experiences, the nitty gritty of it is going to be a little different. And that's what I meant earlier when I said allowing ourselves to sit with ambiguity. Part of the ambiguity is the idea that other people's experiences are not exactly the same as ours, and acknowledging that, be comfortable
Absolutely. So when I say don't even try, I don't mean don't listen to your friend, or don't let them elaborate what you're saying. Don't say, yeah, I can't get that, so bye. No, that'd be awful. So
Mic drop.
what I mean is, don't feel that you have to understand their situation in order to be a supportive friend or in order to offer help, because you aren't them. So that thing you went through 2 weeks ago, and they appear to be going through something similar, they may not handle it the way you do. It may hit them differently. So even if they have a similar experience, it may land very differently for them. And they may feel that if you say, I had this happen. My first child, I went through 44 hours of labor. I had a very good friend who we went through prenatal stuff together and became real close. She had 6 hours of labor. We had a good laugh about the fact that neither of us could understand the other's experience because ours was so different. And also, I felt some envy at the short labor, and she felt some envy about the not having a sudden tornado overtake your body and have a child come out the other end with very little time to feel prepared. So
I think that's the first time I've heard of labor as a sudden tornado, and I really love it.
It's such an evocative metaphor.
It was all fine, and then there was a baby, pretty much, and it was tough. So
some witch got hit by a house. It was all over the place. So let's actually pause here for our mid-episode disclaimer. Remind listeners and viewers of our disclaimer, and then we'll come back with a little bit more about this before checking in with chat. So stick around.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Apparently, I tried to end the show. Sorry about that.
No, we're done. We're done.
No.
I'm out of here. I'm not even
no
untying my
second
bow
half.
tie this time.
No second half. Just going straight to the end. So we have a few more points on here, but I think a segue that I kind of want to do into this is starting off with a talk about the thing that's been going on with neurodivergent people on Twitter, talking about the whole, neurodivergent people. A lot of them are a way of relating to the person is by telling the story of something similar that happened to them. And reading that was one of those moments that I was just like, oh, wow, no, that's why I do that. Okay, because my friend Kyle, who I've mentioned before, who also has ADHD, we would do this so much that, like, and we've known each other for 20 years, that we would pull up the other person's reference for them before they could even say it. And I think one of the things, though, is that, like, that is a thing. That is how neurodivergent people can relate to things. But I do think that this next part is kind of the best way to weight both of those, because I think it would be wrong, personally, is my personal opinion. I feel like it would be wrong for one to overtake the other.
Well, so I'll speak to that for a sec. So this is something I've been seeing coming up more and more, and it's true that those of us who are autistic, those of us with ADHD, we tend to info dump and self-disclose.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just say from personal experience, with that sort of communication style, there is an art.
Yeah.
Yes. There is an art to demonstrating to the neurotypicals.
What the heck was that?
That's some face there.
Don't worry about it. I don't have any lingering anger about being a Linux in a Windows world. Don't worry about it. But no, there's an art form to self-disclosing an experience of yours as a way of creating some sort of cognitive empathy anchor point and demonstrating that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And being able to say, hey, here's an experience I have. Here's an experience I have that I think might have some overlaps to what you're trying to tell me. How close am I? Because I'm trying to find a hook to hang it on. There is an art form to that. And one of the things I consciously try to be aware of when I do that, because again, I usually, those of you who saw the Autism AMA, it's a metaphor I use all the time, that those of us who are autistic, we're Linux in a Windows world. And the problem is people expect us to be Windows, and we're not. And we can do our best to try and interface with the Windows PCs around us. But one of the tricks I do is just call it out that this is what I'm doing. I'm giving a self-example because I'm trying to find a cognitive anchor point, and then letting them correct me. That's an important thing. Just calling it out, letting them correct me, and this is what I'm doing. I'm not trying to center the conversation on myself. I am trying to find something to anchor your story to.
Mm-hmm.
And being overt about that has been a helpful tip for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you just do it, and I used to do that as well, I would just kind of share, oh yeah, a similar, I wouldn't even necessarily say a similar happened to me. I'd launch in,
Mm-hmm.
There's the impulsivity around ADHD as well. And it, I think, felt to the listener like I was just trying to insert myself into their story.
Yep.
Right.
You really want to avoid doing that part.
Right.
You want to think about what you're saying. I think, Treavor, is also different when you have a friend with that many memories and references together. Part of what is comforting in those situations is not having to explain the self for your friend. Say they're the one who's going through a thing,
Right.
and you're bringing up references to their history. Part of what's comforting about that for them is that you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wonderful shared identity and memory pool to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that, it's great to be able to draw on it, because sometimes we go through a thing that kind of causes us to question our identity and ourself, and is painful. And if we have someone in our life who is saying, yeah, 2 Octobers ago when you, and then you and I, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm still me. And, so that's wonderful. And also about the connection with the friendship. I think when we're doing these kinds of inserts or info dumps, or one person who's written about neurotypicals and non-neurotypicals has called it weavers versus concluders. People who weave a tapestry together and telling a story versus someone who's like, could you get to the point? So yeah.
I used to
stating what your intention is.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. So I will call one of the ways I do that is, so my point in telling all of that is X, Y, and Z. My point, here's why I'm saying what I'm saying. And often that is. So my point in saying all this is this a similar thing? So I can cognitively empathize with what you're saying. I'm not trying to center it on me. I'm trying to, I want to find that hook to hang my hat on. Boy, for most people that's a metaphor. For me, I guess that's
just,
yeah, I know, right? I was fully
yeah.
distracted for a second.
Real quick though, the Weavers thing is like, get to the point. At one point I was just like, listen, I write novels. Do you think I'm not going to speak in them? But the reason that I wanted to bring that up, not just because like it is a point of this topic, but also because I feel like what you're saying about the being overt and stuff like that kind of transitions into our next part, which is what do you need from me right now, which for me as someone with ADHD has probably been the best way to wade that, is just basically be like, okay, I have a lot of stuff running through my head right now. I'm gonna stop for a moment and ask them, do you like, I've recently been like, do you want me to listen? Do you want suggestions? Or something like this? What do you need from me? That way I know how to conduct myself for them.
Exactly. That's such a useful question.
But one of the things to bear in mind is tone is important here.
Yeah.
There's a difference between, okay, what do you need from me?
Oh yeah, no.
And okay, I want to help. What do you need from me right now? And I will say that I'm going to call out V, the crafting muse, who is the community manager over at WizKids. And there have been many times that I have sent her text messages, and it's been for empathy, press 1. For validation, press 2. For venting, press 3. For solutions, press 4. Press 5 for a combination of any or all of the above.
Yep. I'm going to say here that I think women might have a slightly harder time with what do you need from me? And people who are super independent and have a hard time asking for help will also interpret that the word need can be a huge trigger in the sense that I don't want to need something. I want to appear independent. It's already been such a stretch for me to share whatever.
Exactly.
So I want to help. How can I help?
Okay, I like that.
There's variations, and you're going to find a style that what works for me is not going to work for Mitra, is not going to work for Treavor, is not going to work for you. I have a dear friend who, I think a lot of us have that friend who you don't know how they get away with saying the things they do, but some reason they just have this aura of charm about them, like their persuasion. They've got double expertise on persuasion, and they get away with saying things that you would be punched on sight for saying, and they make friends that way. And so yeah, you're gonna as you gain these skills, you're going to figure out your style and what works for you,
and you're going to figure out your style with different people. Because for some people, something really direct is probably like, what do you need right now? I'm here for you. Might be, they'll be much more receptive to that maybe than anything with more roundaboutation to it. Whereas others are going to be so concerned about being a burden that you're going to have to choose your words around being helpful. You're going to have to say, no, really, I want to be there for you. you are doing me a favor in terms of our friendship by allowing me to know about this and by allowing me to be here and listen to you. And I really want to offer something practical as well if I can, if you need that, so it all depends on the person you're speaking with. We've kind of touched on listening versus speaking. We haven't really touched on assumption of ignorance yet in terms of going into the conversation. Do we want to quickly touch on what that means?
We did talk a little bit about like having a humble attitude.
Right. Let's be clear, though, that going in with the idea that I don't know is actually really important. When someone's sharing an experience, it's not your experience. You don't know how it's landing for them. If you go in with the assumption that you really don't know and you have curiosity and openness and you want to understand more about what the person's experiencing, you'll be better off with that. You'll probably hear more, and you may be able to hear in a way you haven't before, because they may fill out parts that you haven't heard before. So setting aside your own assumptions, and of course we've talked about your own agenda. So yeah.
Well, additionally, there's something that people keep bringing up in the chat. And it seems to be a question of, what do you do if you don't know what you need? And in those moments when I'm either on the end of somebody who's, I'm autistic. I'm often overwhelmed. I struggle with alexithymia, which go check out the AMA if you don't know what that means. But I struggle with identifying what I need in a moment. And for someone to just be comfortable with me saying, I don't know, and sitting with me in that ambiguity, that in and of itself is doing something. Being okay with someone saying, I don't know, and just sitting with them on that can be a powerful thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
I like that. Let's see. There's a couple other points that we had. I think one that we should cover is you don't have to be the one person who helps.
Absolutely.
You don't know me.
Don't I, though? Done 19 episodes together.
Yeah.
I don't care. La. You're gonna call me out like that? I mean, why are you gonna chat? He attacked me.
I was there. I saw no attacks.
Where's the report button?
Well, I'm invalidating you right there.
I'm gonna send you so many parody emotes. So what do we mean by that?
Okay, so we mean that there are boundaries on what you can do, and it's okay to set them. Yeah, maybe you can bring dinner tomorrow night, but you can't do it 5 nights in a row, or you don't have the financial means, or you also have to chauffeur your kid to soccer or whatever. It's okay. You do not have to be the only person who helps. What you can do is say, oh, hey, who else, what other supports? You can ask those questions. You don't ask them right away, but you can think about who else other people could bring in, which other people, I should say. You can say, this sounds serious. What would it be like to call your sister or your dad as well? You can make suggestions. But you can also say, what I can do is I can come by on Wednesday. What I can do is I can check in with you tomorrow night. Be clear on what you can and can't do. Don't stretch yourself, because you want the friendship to be around for a long time. You don't want to create a situation where you start to feel resentful and burnt out by the friendship, because that doesn't do either of you any good.
Well, so one of the things I like to think of in that respect, and this is just autism framework, pedantic brain kicking in, is sort of social structures around things. And Mitra, you brought this up earlier, that in a therapy setting, it's a business relationship. It's an empathic, genuinely caring business relationship, but it is a business relationship, and it's a largely one-way thing, at least in terms of the emotions. And we agree to enter into that formally. Whereas friendships, most social relationships, need to be two-way. They need to be reciprocal.
Yep.
And if I am the only one giving emotional output without getting things in return that are worthwhile to me, that's not an equal friendship. That is lopsided. And it's not to say that friendships don't wax and wane and oscillate from time to time on who's giving, who's pushing, who's pulling, and so forth. But as a trend overall, friendships, romantic relationships, even families need to have that equal reciprocity in order to be healthy. And so this is a question I have to ask myself on, because I am a natural helper. And this isn't a question I answer for myself. I find it empowering to be a resource to my friends. And they like to use it, but are they giving me what I need in return as a friend? And these are questions I have to ask. And you should ask those too.
It's very important. I used to fall into friendships where I was always the helping friend. And the problem with that is eventually you start to feel like the more capable person in the relationship, which means that when you have needs, you find it very difficult to ask that person for help because you have seen them, you begin to see them as unreliable, which is unfair to the friendship and certainly unfair to yourself as well. So keeping that balance in terms of friendship is important. There are times when there'll be less balance. A very good friend of mine dealt with the death of a friend. There's not balance in that situation when someone's slowly dying of cancer and you're being a support in their lives. But it's also honoring your relationship with them, to stay connected with them through an experience that's difficult like that and that's meaningful to both people in the friendship. So, but we have to figure out for ourselves the journeys that we're willing to be on with people and the connections that we want to honor, and set boundaries around them for our own health. So, yeah.
Before we check in with chat, is there any last points that you want to hit really quick?
I kind of want to quickly hit the comfort in, dump out thing we talked about.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to bring up actually the little thing I drew, which is like me and my fine art. So there's somebody who came up with something they called the ring theory, and it's pretty easy to look up. You had a different, fancier name for it, though, Raffael.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a little scared now, because now that you're telling us about ring theory, everybody in the chat's going to have to tell their friends about it within 7 days, or a wet-haired scary girl is going to...
She'll crawl her way out of your TV and go, "Do you want to learn to be a better friend?
Do you want to?"
I do.
Yeah,
I do. I want to learn to be a better friend, scary wet-haired girl.
What? All right. So if somebody's going through a thing, they're in the center of this circle. Okay, they're the one going through the thing. This might be their partner. This might be you, or this might be you, but you're not the one going through the thing. All right. So you're going to comfort in to the person who's going through the thing, and any upset feelings, fears for them, worries, some of which you might share, but most of which you're going to take and you're going to dump out here to your support person. In the cancer example, you're not going to tell your friend who's dying, "I'm going to really miss you. You're dying. I'm so sad. It's so terrible. Oh my God, I hate that you're going through chemo. Wow, that must hurt. Wow." You're not going to do that. Of course, you're going to share that you're going to miss them, maybe, but you're not going to cry on their shoulder because they're going.
You're not leaning on the person for support when they're the one who needs you.
That's right. You're going to comfort in to them, bring them grapes or whatever they need to eat after their chemo sessions, if it's helpful. And you're going to dump out to your partner, to your other friends. You're going to share about how tough that was, or how the nurse looked mean today, or about how, you're tired, but you really just want to be there. That's who you're going to share it with. Now, if they have a partner, and that's who this person is, you're also not going to dump on their partner or their sister, or maybe their kids. I don't know. You're not going to do that. You're going to work on comforting who you can. And you're going to go over here and talk to your partner and friends. So comfort in, dump out. That's the short version.
So the person the closer someone is to a stressor, you don't confide in them, they confide in you.
Well, confiding can be different.
Well, or you don't lean on them for support, they lean on you.
Right. And particularly about the stressor. I mean, in a good friendship, we might want to normalize things, and they may say, hey, how's your son doing these days, or something, right?
Mhm.
Or how is that new job you started?
Mhm.
Maybe they want a bit of distraction,
Yeah.
and maybe that's a great piece of your friendship, to just be able to talk through this stuff. But you're going to be mindful of how much they can take in. And you're certainly not going to rant for hours about your situation when someone is going through a really serious thing.
Okay. There's two quick tips I want to give to the chat. Really, well, three. One, now you have to tell everybody within 7 days. Someone within 7 days. Otherwise, you will never receive comfort again.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Wow.
He just can't help himself.
That got dark so fast.
That really did. That escalated quickly.
I'm sorry. The two real tips that I want to give is one that Treavor brought up yesterday, and that was a question of if you're reaching out to someone, is this a good time?
Yeah.
If you need help from someone, asking, hey, is this a good time? Can I vent at you for a second? Can I lean on you? Basically, acknowledging that your friends are not your therapist.
I can't tell you how many times in the text conversation with my sister, one of us just started, is right now a good time to talk.
Yeah, so asking permission or asking consent for someone helpful, that can be a really good thing. The other thing is something that's been brought up in the chat a couple times, like, should I tell people I understand or I hear you? That is my experience has been that's a really good start. However, if you instead of saying I hear you or I understand, and saying you say what you hear and what you understand, you demonstrate it instead of saying it. That, in my experience, has often been much more effective, because kind of like saying to someone you sound stressed or you sound upset, they're so vague as to be useless. Okay?
Absolutely.
It can sound minimizing to a lot of people to say you sound stressed, you sound upset, I hear you, or I understand. Instead, be more specific. Label what you understand. Reflect it as accurately as you can, and then let them correct you.
Yeah. So, wow, that sounds like a really tough thing. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely, somebody would be stressed out at their job if that's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I will say, one of the other options that I give people with the, like, do you want suggestions? Do you want me to listen? I will go, do you want me to go along with your emotion right now? Like, if you hate Jerry from work because he's being a jerk, man, screw Jerry. Like, I think that is another viable one to go with.
Absolutely. Can I come over there and break both their legs?
Yeah.
It's okay. So I had
Idle Champions does not endorse breaking of legs.
That's right. But I remember one time I was chatting to a friend, and I was saying, man, it's really pissing me off, and I'd like to hit them with something hard and heavy. And the friend was like, what would you use? And it was the best question. I'm like, I got this really great, cast iron frying pan.
Oh my God!
Like the Bugs Bunny things with the cast iron frying pans. And they were like, yeah.
Part 2 of this episode went places I did not expect. I love it.
It was so great. It was so great. It was part of venting. Yeah. It was part of feeling accompanied. It was being really silly together, because there is a huge difference between the feelings we may have in the moment and the actions we're actually not going to take. Let's be very clear. It's okay to express the feelings. In fact, it's such a relief to have someone laugh with you, cry with you, go along with your silly fantasies, your castles in the air and your frying pans is really great.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going over there and breaking anyone's legs, but yes to venting, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to fix it. Nobody's trying to solve it. We're just taking a minute. And you know what? Once we're done with that, then we're actually in a much better space to be constructive. We don't have to be constructive right away, but it's like, phew, glad I got that off my chest. I feel so much better. I feel like a better human being now. I feel like I can be more charitable with my children now, or my husband, because we need to be able to get those things out.
Yeah. I got to call it Robo Goblin in the chat. He says, when champions of hurtology. Let's check in with chat real quick before we need to wrap this one up. Reaver01 says, so sitting there listening and trying to understand them is like giving their crumbling structure support while you both figure out how to stop them from crumbling.
I like that. That's you're giving you're giving a foundation essentially.
Yeah.
You're shoring things up. I like that's a great metaphor.
Because the biggest thing you're offering as well is that connection. That foundation speaks to relationship and connection. When we have that and we feel less alone with whatever we're dealing with, we're better. We feel better. Isolation is killer.
Yeah. Counting coup, I'm going to change one word in your question I think we can do better with, which changing should to could. Like what could you do if a friend wants you to tell them how to solve their problems? How do you tell them no without seeming to be dismissive or unhelpful?
Well, I mean, at that point, if someone's literally asking for your suggestions, it gets pretty overt. If you've got ideas and they're literally asking for suggestions, well, there you go.
Yeah.
But if you don't, if it's a complex situation and you can't think, like if I'm in that situation, if it's a complex situation and I can't think of any good, clean solutions, then I call that out. This is a hard situation. I don't have any good, clean solutions. And you know what? I bet that's even more frustrating that I can't think of anything when you can't think of anything.
For sure. But one thing you can share, if you can't think of anything and you can say, hey, I have no expertise in this, or like, I really don't know, but you know what? Let's see if we can figure out who can. You guys can start to do a little research together, or you can point them to, a website or a therapist or something else that can be a resource for them. And that's handy. Like, I don't know, do you think maybe a lawyer would help? Or like, do you want to, see about, because there's loads of people who can help with finding the resources. It doesn't have to be you.
Yeah, and apparently now that we've all threatened violence against Gary at Codename Entertainment, I really hope there is no Gary at Codename Entertainment. But if there is not a Gary, there is now, and he is the target of all our anger.
I gotta ask, just so I satisfy chat, were you doing a Parks and Recs reference there? Because I said Jerry and then you said Gary.
Oh! Yes.
Damn it, Gary.
Oh, Jerry.
Oh, Jerry. Yep.
Or Gary.
Oh, yeah. Whichever one you want. Let's see. I'm going to do this last one, and then we will wrap things up. Frontier MTS says, for me, a person who is a helper type, I got burned out not because of the friend seeming unreliable for me. It was not allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to show that I had weakness because everyone needed me. I had to be the strong one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's hard.
That's a hard one.
So hard.
Yeah.
I get that. I relate to that. It is hard for me to talk about stuff because I'm pretty much constantly feeling like I need to be good for everyone else.
Yeah, it took me a while to really try to unlearn that one. And actually what helped was really kind of seeking people who could also do both. I have a lot of friends who are therapists. I think it's partly because we do get quite good at sort of understanding where that boundary is, but at the same time seeking consent before we seek help. Hey, is now a good time, or have you got a minute, or shall we plan a time to chat kind of thing. So, but yeah, part of it is you do deserve help. Just because you're strong, in fact, because you're strong, you do also deserve support. How else do we stay strong, right? So.
And one of the things I think about is that, being literally in a leadership position in a public-facing mental health organization, and also being the friend people lean on in a lot of cases, I'm in a position of trust. And in a position of trust, I need to be able to demonstrate the kind of behavior that I think other people should engage in. And if I'm not willing to ask for help for myself, if I'm not willing to be vulnerable, how can I expect other people to follow that example?
That's really
one
good.
of the things I think about.
Absolutely.
But I think that is going to do it for today's episode. We're run low on time here. Mitra, Dr. B, where can people find you if they want to see what you do on the internet?
Easily available at my Twitter handle at Mitra Jordan, and also my website, mitrajordan.com. I would love to hear from any of you, all of you.
And
Be chatty, chat.
although you're not chatting about what happened to Gary, all right?
Oh, I do have good news. Jay says there is no
Lips
Jerry or
sealed.
Gary at CNE, so we're good.
Not
It's true.
anymore.
Gary, no, he was the worst. Can confirm.
God, Gary.
Guys.
But it's a fine, absolutely follow Take This at TakeThis.org on all of the socials. But if you are looking for me specifically, I am the Dr. B on pretty much all social media platforms. That's TheeDoctorB. And that's where I can be found, unless you're Gary.
You can find me on the Difficulty Class podcast every Friday, as well as Champions of Lore every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, as well as on Twitter at the Treavor. There's an A hiding in there. Thank you to Jay for moderating the chat as always and doing a fantastic job. Thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. I did see someone asking where they can send in their suggestions for the next season. You can send those into Champions of Psychology at codenameentertainment.com or by tweeting it to us. And just saying, here's an idea that I had for a topic, and we'll see what we do with it, because we will be taking a little bit of a break after our season finale next week, but then we'll be back with more good discussions. If you missed any part of the show, you can catch it later today at 2 p.m. as a podcast on your favorite podcast services. If you're live with us, be sure to come back later today for Bardic Inspiration. And I think sketching hours are... I get so messed up with the schedule. I apologize, everybody, for messing up the schedule. You'll see it on the Twitter. I apologize. But that is going to do it for this week's episode. Until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.